Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today we are going to have a look at the King's Gambit, but this is going to be a video applicable for white. I'm going to give you a full repertoire in the King's Gambit against anything black can play against you. So if you're looking for an aggressive weapon against one e5 in your e4 repertoire, this could help. Before we get into the theory, follow the link in the description to Nocti and you will have this entire repertoire, everything you're going to see in the video prepared for easy navigation, and you will be able to play games against Nocti in the King's Gambit instead of learning variations. So Nocti is a human-like AI and it's basically like having a human sparring partner. You can select its difficulty, so just select play, and select Nocti's strength, select the time format, select which side you'd like to play, and Nocti is going to be following the lines I'm recommending. Other than repertoires, which is a great feature on Nocti, my favorite one is themes. So you can basically upload any position, and you can see I do that for all of my games, and all interesting positions I haven't understood, and play them out against Nocti. This is by far the easiest way to learn chess from experience and to transfer knowledge into an actual skill. It's much better than reading books or learning theoretical lines. So follow the link to Nocti. If you decide to go premium and unlock all the features, use the code Hanging Pawns to get a massive 64% discount. The repertoire is also available on my Patreon page for $3 as well as many other openings. As you can see here, you can find the full French repertoire, full Spanish repertoire, full D4 repertoire, London system, Caro-Kann, Sicilian, E4 repertoire, English opening, basically anything. So you can buy them separately if you want, or you can become a member for $3 a month and gain access to all of these and about 500 other posts. So if you want to support the channel, if you want the PGN, follow the link in the description, get the repertoire. Now let's get to the King's Gambit. As you may know, I'm not a very courageous chess player and I rarely play very aggressive openings, although recently I have started playing 1f4 and I started experimenting with more aggressive stuff. So I wanted to create a King's Gambit repertoire. So we're going to be looking at everything black can do after they accept the gambit. We're also going to have a look at the two most popular ways to decline the King's Gambit, which is the Falkbeer with d5 and bishop c5. Now, before we begin, I have recorded a full playlist on the King's Gambit before. You can find all the videos below, and if you want alternatives to what I'm going to recommend, you can have a look at those. I've also created a full video on the traps in the King's Gambit for both sides, so maybe have a look at the introduction and the trap video before you get into this if you haven't played the King's Gambit before. So we're going to begin with the basis of our repertoire, which is, what happens after they take the pawn. The idea in the King's Gambit is to create a very broad center with d4 very quickly, if we are allowed, by taking away the defender of the d4 square. The idea is similar to the Queen's Gambit when you play d4, c4, when you want to gain control over the e4 square, but when you do that on the king's side, it's much more risky. And you probably know that the King's Gambit is a very risky opening. In some lines that we are going to be looking at today, black is going to be more than equal if they know exactly what they are doing, and there is no way to avoid that, so you aren't going to have a small edge like you do in, I don't know, the Spanish. So we begin with ef4. And after ef4, whatever happens next, we always play knight f3. There are alternatives, bishop c4 being one of the main alternatives, but knight f3 is the principal move, and it gains more control over d4 and e5, and also it prepares jumps into e5, g5, maybe h4, supports the attack on f7, and it's a well-placed piece. So black has many things they can do from here, and we are going to have a look at the Kieseritzky Gambit, the Fischer Defense, the Cunningham Defense, the Modern Defense, the Schallopp, which is what my friend Vlatko plays all the time, the Bonsh-Osmolovsky and the Becker's Defense, and those are basically the 7 variations you can have a look at from here. As I said, you can find the link to the repertoire below, and it's going to be much easier to follow all of this if you're actually looking at the moves yourself. So let's begin with the Kieseritzky Gambit. So one of the more principled moves for black is g5. I mean, they just save the pawn, and if we played something like d4 now, we wouldn't even be attacking the f4 pawn. Not that white always wants to regain the f4 pawn in the King's Gambit, that's very seldom the idea actually, but g5 just doesn't allow any of that, and it also allows black to continue their advance on the king's side, misplacing our knight. From here, we are going to go into the Kieseritzky Gambit. We are going to play h4, and when black plays g4, which is the only move, h6 does not work because it loses a rook, the pawn is pinned. When they play g4, we are going to go knight e5. Again, there are alternatives which are more crazy than this, but knight e5 is the principled move. And this is where basically the variation begins. Black has a couple of options. Knight f6 is the main move, but d6 is a very principled alternative to that. The idea behind knight e5, of course, was not only to put pressure on f7, but also to take the pawn on g4. And when we take the pawn on g4, black can play bishop e7 or knight f6. Let's assume knight f6. We can take, queen takes, and we go knight c3, continuing our development. We have regained our pawn, which is why this isn't considered to be the best way for black to play. And actually, if you turn on the engine, it's roughly equal. After knight c6, let's say, we can go knight d5. Black can go queen g6, and now we have to be careful. If we go crazy with a move like knight c7, we are losing, because after king d7, knight takes rook, queen g3 is actually checkmate. After king d2, knight d4, so be careful. Knight c6 is a very, very scary move. After knight c6, knight d5, queen g6, we have to start defending. So we have to defend against knight d4 and queen g3 and all that stuff. So we go d3, and when they go queen g3, we now have the move king d2 at our disposal. And again, the position is equal. If you avoid this mate with queen g3, knight d4, you're perfectly fine, which is why most people aren't going to do that against you. So most people are going to play the move knight f6 here, defending the pawn on g4, and we are going to take the pawn anyway. Black has very thematic compensation in this line, and this is the basis of the Kieseritzky Gambit. We take this pawn, they take on e4, and we play d3. This is basically the beginning of the line. After knight g3, we regain the pawn on f4, black plays queen e7 check, and we go bishop e2. All of this is pretty much forced, and in this position, every grandmaster plays the move rook g8. The idea being they want to take the knight because the bishop on e2 is pinned, and they basically want to increase the pressure on our king side. There is one line which I have to mention. It's a trap actually, which happens after knight takes rook. And now white is simply winning. Please remember this. It's very likely this will happen in your games, at least online. This traps the queen, which is incredible. But after bishop g5, the queen has no squares because knight f6 limits the king. And eventually we either checkmate black or win the queen. For example, on queen e6, knight f6 check, king d8, knight d5 check. And that's about it. I don't know, if king e8, knight c7, if f6 we take, and black has to give up the queen. Or for example, queen b4 check, c3, queen takes b2, knight f6 check, king e7, knight d5 check. Now this is going to be mate. It's not easy to calculate, but it's actually all forcing. After knight d6, after king d6, knight e8 check, king d5, d4, and the idea is knight c7 in many situations, followed by a bishop checkmate. So for example, let's say knight g3, I don't even know what to suggest. Bishop f3 check, king c4, and knight c7, and it's going to be mate next move. There is nothing black can do about it. So after bishop e2, black cannot take the rook. They go rook g8. And now we take the knight, they take our knight, we go bishop f2, saving the bishop, black takes on g2, and we continue developing. Ideally, we want to castle queenside. We're down a pawn, but black is far away from developing their queenside, and actually they still cannot afford to continue development, because if they don't go d5, if they don't start opening up this bishop, they're going to be in trouble. For example, if knight c6, we can go queen d2, and I don't know, if d6, then we go knight d5, the queen needs to defend c7, I don't know, queen f4, there's pressure on f7, on c7, we're going to castle queenside, it's winning for white. So they should go d5. And we don't take this pawn, be careful. If knight d5, there's queen e5. And even though the engine says this is fine after c4, we don't want to get into a position like this where we have to start defending. Instead, we continue development. Queen d2. c6, bishop e3, bishop e6, and castles queenside. And you can see that black's king is never going to be safe. That's the point. If black knows everything, we're going to be better, because their king is going to be offside. Better from a human perspective. It's equal according to the engine. So in the Kieseritzky Gambit, the best you can expect if black knows what they're doing is a position where you're down a pawn, but you have a safer king and the lead in development. So it's not too risky. Now, the Fischer defense. After knight f3, the move d6 was what Fischer came up with, and he actually called it a bust to the King's Gambit. He said that the King's Gambit has been refuted because of d6. Now, the idea behind d6, black wants to play g5 and have those same lines we just looked at, but they don't allow knight e5. It's as simple as that. It also opens up the bishop very early. So in some lines, the bishop could come out to g4, but basically knight e5 isn't a possibility anymore. So we go d4, they go g5 now, we go into the same type of position, h4, g4, and now as you can see, knight e5 is not possible, so we need to move the knight back to g1. So basically, it's the Kieseritzky Gambit with d4, d6 inserted. That changes things because we don't have knight e5, and it also changes things because the f4 pawn is attacked. So after knight g1, most people with black are going to defend the pawn on f4. And they can do that two different ways, queen f6 or bishop h6. Those are the two most popular moves. There are two alternatives though. Knight f6, which we're going to have a look at first, which simply attacks the pawn on e4. So if we take on f4, they take on e4. So we're going to defend the pawn. And now knight h5. The idea is similar to what happens in the Schallopp defense, which we're going to have a look at in a second. Knight f6 is often played to play knight h5 to defend the pawn on f4. But more importantly, when this knight reaches h5, it's very hard to do anything on the king side. Okay, so what we're going to do is knight g2, and we put more pressure on f4. Now, black could try bishop h6, but after knight d5, it's no longer possible to defend the pawn, so no one plays that. So after knight g2, most people just get rid of the pawn by playing f3. And this is the best way to play. Knight f4, knight g3, okay, rook h2, knight f1, king f1. Now, I looked at this position for a long time, and I pretended that I liked white. I don't, I'm going to be honest. I don't like this position for white. The engine says equal and it's all fine. Something like rook g8, gf3. But it seems way too risky, in my opinion. The engine gives c6 here as equal for black, and after queen e1, gf3 and e5 is the line, which makes no sense to me. I would never play queen e1 here. But then again, what do? I don't know. If let's say bishop e3, then gf3, queen f3, bishop g4 is very, very annoying. So you have to move your queen, sort of. So It's unclear to me that knight f6 is a bad move. I actually like the idea of playing knight h5. However, if you're going to do that as black, I would recommend that you play the Schallopp immediately, because I think it's superior to this. Other than knight f6, the second move that doesn't defend f4 is f5. And we are simply going to take that pawn, because fe4 is not as scary as knight e4. Now black's pawns have been split, and this bishop feels very safe. It seems like these two pawns are going to be weak forever. Okay, let's continue development. Bishop c4, d5, bishop b3, bishop g7, and knight e2. It seems that we have access to many squares, and we're going to go c4. So I'm not a big fan of the move f5. The engine actually hates it, so I wouldn't recommend that anyone plays this with black. We go c4 now. If this is taken, white is close to winning according to the engine. For example, dc4, bishop c4, knight g7, knight bc3. You can see that all of our pieces are very active. Our king is going to be incredibly safe on the king's side, and e4 and g4 are going to be weaknesses. So, what should black do? Black should play queen f6 or bishop h6, in my opinion. Bishop h6 is the best move, but queen f6 is very scary. Knight c3, knight e7, knight g2, putting more pressure on f4, and now bishop h6. This will actually transpose in most lines. Whatever we do, black is going to play queen f6 or bishop f6. The alternative, which I like for black, but the engine doesn't approve of it that much, is f3. And now knight f4. We got similar lines to what we had a look at previously, but since the queen is on f6, it could be harassed with one of these two moves. So after something like knight bc6, bishop e3, white actually has an advantage. So, a transposition. Now, a more likely way to reach this position is if they start with bishop h6. We go knight c3, they go c6, we go knight g2, they go queen f6. It's the same position. Now, we want to chase that queen away somehow, and most people in this position are going to go g3. And g3 is a fine move, but the best engine move is what I'm going to recommend. That's e5. And it's a pawn sacrifice, so takes, but we don't take back. The idea behind e5 was to gain access to the e4 square, so knight e4. Now we chase the queen away. The queen goes to g6, attacking the knight, and now we bring the other knight to c3. So we have activated both knights, sacrificed more material. It seems crazy, but the engine actually likes white. It's slightly better for white, unless black plays perfectly, in which case it's equal. The best move for black is f5. It has been played twice. And now we continue the craziness. This is just something you're going to have to learn, as is the case with most King's Gambit lines. h5, okay, chasing the queen further away, queen e6, and now bishop c4. This is the point. We get very rapid development. If the queen takes on c4, then knight d6, of course. So queen d7. And now castles. And I'm going to be honest, playing this in a tournament game, I would feel terrified despite knowing that this is my prep. We're sacrificing a knight and a bunch of pawns. And after fe4, white is slightly better. Knight e4. Now, of course, if queen takes on d4, this is absolutely losing because of knight d6 check. And the king should really defend the bishop. But after something like king d7, there's knight f7 and the rook falls. So that doesn't work. So the engine says this is winning for white. So queen takes d4 isn't possible. The best move for black, the only move that keeps them in the game, is actually c5. And after c5, we don't take, we go c3. They continue developing, and now d5. And in many positions, black can lose here in a couple of moves. For example, if the knight moves away to e7, which is probably the best move, then we have bishop b5. And I don't know what to suggest for black here. let's say, okay, yeah, so, excuse me, knight c6 is the only move. So it's very, very scary for black if you go for this crazy line with e5. And I think this is why the Fischer defense is no longer as popular as it used to be a few decades ago. So this is the key move. After c6 and queen f6, e5. We gain access to the e4 square. We develop the other knight to c3. If they go f5, which they should, we go h5, queen e6, bishop c4. This is the idea. All of our pieces are attacking. And I have to say, this is a position that I think most of you will enjoy as white. It's a typical king's gambit, but it doesn't involve too much risk. It seems very scary to give up a knight like this, but when you analyze the position and see that it's not that easy to develop the knight on g8, for example, we're now threatening in many cases to take on g8 and take on f6. So after c5, it doesn't work now because there's queen d4 check. That's the point. But if there wasn't for queen d4, if our king was on h1, we would simply be winning a piece. And there will be many tricks like this in your own games. It's not like you can prepare this and learn all the variations by heart, but learn the patterns. The f6 square, the d6 square, bishop b5 check, stuff like that. Okay, moving on. We're going to have a look at the Cunningham defense. And the idea behind this one is very, very simple. They want to develop very quickly and castle kingside very quickly without any complications. Also, there is a line in which black plays bishop h4 check. This is sort of the idea for lower rated players behind the Cunningham. It's not a good move. We can just go king f1, and the bishop on h4 doesn't make too much sense because it's very hard to develop the knight now. So after something like d5, bishop d5, knight f6, that's how they justify having a bishop on h4. We can actually go in for this trade and play queen e1 check, and that's basically the end of the line. So after bishop c4, most people will play knight f6. We're going to go e5, knight g4, castles, castles, and this is black's idea. They want a safe position. They are most likely going to give the pawn back because the knight's coming to e3. Long term, they give the pawn back. So d4, d6, h3 takes, f takes, queen e2. This pawn is going to fall, but black's going to have a normal position. I don't even know which opening this would resemble, but it's fairly equal. So I don't think we should be concerned with bishop e7. Okay. Now the modern defense. After knight f3, the modern defense starts with d5. And this is very, very similar to the Falkbeer Counter-Gambit when they play d5 on move 2. And we are actually going to transpose the way we play this. So e takes d5. Now, of course, queen takes d5. We get to develop the knight for free, so that's not a good move. And black is going to play this the same way they would play the knight f6 Scandinavian, so knight f6, preparing to regain the pawn with the knight. However, we can actually get away with c4 here, and we are going to play c4. The most popular moves are bishop b5 check and bishop c4, but we are going to go c4. And the idea is, after c6, we go knight c3, they take, and now if they take once again, if they play knight takes d5, we simply go bishop c4. And let's say knight c3, we can play bc3 or dc3, I of course prefer bc3, let's say bishop d6, queen e2 check, and after queen e7 we can actually exchange queens and go knight g5, and it's not easy to defend f7. So this seems fine to me. Most people are not going to take that pawn because it's too scary. They're going to go bishop d6, and now we go bishop b5 check, and after knight bd7, queen e2 check, queen e7, exchange queens, believe it or not, and castle. And this is a position in which the material is actually equal. And I slightly prefer white because when we get in d3 or d4, probably d4, and excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, and start putting pressure on f4, it's not going to be easy to defend that pawn. Of course, white shouldn't really have an advantage. So the modern defense is very similar to the Falkbeer, actually. Okay, now I call this Flatko's defense, but it's actually called the Schallopp defense, knight f6. The idea behind knight f6, as we said, is h5, knight h5. And instead of pushing the g-pawn like a madman, which is the case in most King's Gambit accepted lines, black is going to defend with knight h5 and also have access to the g3 square. So if something comes out to h4, g3 is going to be even harder to play. So we go e5, they go knight h5, we go d4. Okay, and now black can play d5 or d6. I think d6 is the more principled move. Against d5 we can go c4 straight away, and on g5 we go g4. This really seems like a suboptimal way for black to play. If they play bishop takes g4 now, we should point that out, then rook g1 wins the material back, and it's just no good. So on g4, knight g7 is the only move. If f takes g3, then knight takes g5, and white's actually winning because the knight's hanging. And after knight g7, we now go h takes g3, and we have a massive material, not material, tactical advantage because f7 is so incredibly weak. Also, h7 is hanging. Also, we could at some point take on d5. We have knight c3 putting pressure on d5. Black is losing. So they should go knight g7, knight c3, dc4, bishop c4, and you can see that it's very messy for black. So most people will play d6. Okay, queen e2, d takes e5, knight takes e5, putting pressure on the knight, and queen h4. This is the point. Okay, so we're about to lose our rook on h1, but we're going to have compensation for that. g3, knight takes, h takes, queen takes, bishop takes f4. So what's the situation? We have 5 pawns, black has 6. We're down an exchange, but we're going to castle queenside quickly, and we have tactical compensation for the material. I have to say that I'm starting to like the Schallopp defense more and more precisely because of this. I don't think this is a good position for white. I don't think I would be able to navigate it well. The engine says equal, but I don't really like this kind of equal. On bishop d6 we have no good discoveries, so the best move is knight c3, castles, castles. Of course, black's queen is misplaced, black's queenside is not developed. Of course there's compensation, but you mess up and you play it too slow for a move or two, you lose your compensation. Ideas like bishop g2 and rook h1 and bishop e4, or queen e4, or queen h5, or knight e4, or knight d5, or knight f7, they all work. And you have to find the correct tactical sequence if the opportunity arises. My problem is, what if it doesn't? What if black defends well? Then it's very easy to drop the initiative during a game and to allow black to consolidate. If the knight on b8 somehow manages to come out to f6, if the bishop comes to g4, it could become really scary. That being said, white is fine and black could easily lose in a single move. However, if you play it slow, you're just down too much. Okay. The Bonsh-Osmolovsky, the move knight e7. The move knight e7 is... I don't like this move for black. The idea is, of course, to play d5 and to have the knight come out to d5, because then you can defend the pawn on f4 and jump into e3 if needed. So it's in a way similar to the Schallopp, because black wants to defend the f4 pawn with the knight just from the d5 square. So when we play d4, they play d5. And of course now with bishop f4, then de4, so that's no good. We take, we don't take, we play knight c3, de4, knight e4, and knight d5. That's the point. And now if there's too much pressure on the pawn, black can safely go knight e3 and defend. So bishop c4, bishop e7, both sides castle, and rook e1. And after something like c6, bishop b3, we are preparing to play c4. I think black is fine, but I really don't think this is as good as the Schallopp, as the Fischer, even as the Cunningham Defense. So I don't think we should struggle with this too much. Something like bishop f5, c4. Of course, black could play knight e3 now, give the pawn back, but they shouldn't. So knight f6, takes, and bishop f4. We got our pawn back, and I would say that white has a slightly better position because we have an easy plan. We're going to go d5. Black does have the bishop pair, but that roughly compensates for our passed pawn, potential passed pawn. So I'm not too concerned with the Bonsh-Osmolovsky. Becker's defense. The move h6. The idea behind h6 is pretty self-explanatory. Black wants to go g5 and, you know, not advance the pawn to g4. They just want to defend the pawn. So when we go d4, they go g5. And now, of course, playing h4 wouldn't make much sense because g4. So knight c3, bishop g7, and g3. We are going to break up this structure. And of course, if allowed, we take on f4, so they take. And now we have pressure on g5. So after something like d6, bishop c4, there are already ideas. For example, if knight e7, then we may consider taking on g5 twice. Maybe it doesn't work yet, but after knight g5, hg5, rook h8, bishop h8, bishop g5, or even queen h5. I haven't engine checked this. Okay, let's see. Plus 1.3 after bishop d4. Wow. Okay, black survives, but this is just the type of ideas you get in this line. So I think h6 is kind of slow. Black really should go bishop g4 and pin this knight to make sure they don't allow any knight g5 ideas. And now this may surprise you. Most people play rook f1 here. We're gonna castle because we want to increase the pressure on f7, and our king is actually relatively safe. Knight f6, queen e1. Probably bishop f3, rook f3. I mean, of course, black has a bunch of extra material, but white is supposed to be equal or more than equal in many lines. For example, knight bd7. We're playing for e5, we're playing for pressure on f7, and we have to get our pieces to the f-file very, very quickly. We are down a pawn, but it doesn't look grim for white. So this was the last minor defense I wanted to have a look at. Now we're going to move on to King's Gambit declined. So what if they don't take? There are two ways for black not to take the pawn, other than, I guess I can show you the minor sidelines first. So one line which we have to look at is queen h4 check. This is just, it makes no sense. We go g3, they have to drop the queen back, knight c3, ef4, and now of course we don't take again. There's no need to do that, just d4 and takes. We have a massive center, great development, very active pieces. Black is worse. Knight f6 is called the Petrov defense, which is weird. Well, it's not weird, it's the same as the Petrov. But after fe5, knight e4, knight f3, something like queen e7 and knight c3, white just has a small advantage, so you shouldn't be afraid of that. One line which we have to pay attention to is knight c6, and this is actually called the Miles defense if followed up with f5. So after knight f3, f5, this is pretty scary. And it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do against this. And I had decided to play ef, e4, and knight e5. And this seems to be a way for white to gain an edge, and white is supposed to be significantly better here, plus 0.7. For example, knight f6, knight c3, queen e7, bishop e2. We give the pawn back, takes, takes, queen takes, and d4. If queen f5, g4, and this is winning for white, believe it or not. After queen e6, d5, and the queen just gets chased away as well as the knight, and white should be winning. This is the critical line, and I'm guessing if black doesn't know it, they're gonna make a terrible blunder somewhere along the way and lose the game. So this is how I would deal with the Miles defense, but it's so minor that you may never encounter it actually. Okay, the Falkbeer. So d5. D5 is the most popular way to decline the King's Gambit. It's the Albin Counter-Gambit in the King's Gambit. Okay, so we take on d5. No debate. Black can go c6, which is the Nimzowitsch Gambit. Black can go e4, or black can take on f4. Let's look at c6 first. On c6, we don't take again. That would be too scary. We go queen e2. And now either e4 or cd5. On e4 we take with the queen, that's not too much trouble. On cd5, fe5, and on knight c6, knight f3. This seems fine to me. Something like bishop g4, knight c3, d4, knight e4 seems fine. After queen d5, knight f2, and white should have a small edge. So the two critical moves are e4, against which we are going to go d3. We have to challenge this pawn straight away. Knight f6, d4, knight e4, knight f3. White's position is unsafe, but we do have at least an extra pawn for now. So after something like bishop c5, queen e2, bishop f5. I should say that bishop f2 doesn't work. This is just losing. After king d1, two pieces are hanging. Let's say queen d5, knight fd2 actually, and black is losing material. So bishop f5 defending the knight, knight c3, queen e7, bishop e3, and something like this seems fine to me. We are up a pawn, and of course black can take on c2, but at least we have a potential passed pawn down the d file, so white should be slightly better. The move you're going to see most of the time, almost all the time, in the Falkbeer is e takes f4. That's the critical move. And this is the line that's going to transpose to the modern defense. We had a look at this in part, what was that, 4 of the King's Gambit accepted. So knight f3, knight f6, c4. Okay, so they just transpose. So go back to that chapter if you want to have another look at that. And finally, the classical variation. Now, the classical variation is bishop c5. And in many ways, this makes a lot of sense because black is developing a piece. We aren't going to take on e5, of course, because we are going to lose. So we continue knight f3, they go d6, and black is just playing it very, very safe, not taking the pawn, developing the pieces. After knight c3, knight f6. And this line will probably be the most theoretical line other than the Kieseritzky and the Fischer defense. So bishop c4, before playing d3, we want to develop the bishop. And of course, when black plays bishop c5, it's very hard to play d4. So also, they haven't taken on f4. Knight c6, d3, bishop g4, knight a4. Okay, so most people are going to go bishop b6 here. But first I want to show you ef4, which is an okay move, but it leads to a position in which Alechin played his famous queen sacrifice. So we take on c5, dc5, and bishop f4. Now, a normal move here, I don't know, would be bishop takes f3 or castles, or queen d7, preparing to castle queenside. But what if they go knight h5? If they go knight h5, then bishop e3, the pawn's hanging. And I don't know, queen e7 now would be almost playable for black. But in the game Alechin played, his opponent played knight e5. And remember this pattern. This is going to occur in your own games. Knight takes e5, giving up the queen, bishop d1, and bishop takes f7 is game over. On, I don't know, on king e7, bishop c5 is done. Queen d6, bishop takes, and on king f8, we simply castle. And there are so many discoveries that black is just busted. For example, knight f6, bishop takes c5, and the game is over. So, on knight a4, most people play bishop b6. We take that bishop, a takes, and c3. And we're simply playing, I want to say, an improved Italian, because we have the bishop pair. We already have a pawn on f4. It's going to be possible to play d4 if they ever take on f4. We may consider taking on e5 at the correct moment. We may consider playing f5 at the correct moment. So something like castles, castles, ef4, bishop f4, and knight h5. I think this position is very enjoyable for any e4 player because it's very natural in a sense, because you have pressure on f7 and you can play queen e1, unpin, continue with knight g5. I think this position plays itself. I mean, it's not a big advantage to white or anything. You'll probably give up the bishop pair immediately after knight e5, or at least have your g-pawn on f3, but I still think this is great for white. So, in my opinion, the classical variation, if white knows what they are doing in the King's Gambit, is not challenging at all. To sum up, the problem defenses, in my opinion, are the Schallopp Defense, some lines in the Fischer, and some lines in the Kieseritzky Gambit. Other than that, I think white's positions are not only equal or slightly better, but also very easy and intuitive to play. Thank you for watching. Hope you got something from the video. Once again, the resources and the repertoire, you can find them in the description and in the comments below. And stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.